Coming up on the Men at the Movies podcast is part 2 of our conversation about the movie Elf. This is a redemption story. Buddy left the North Pole to rescue Walter, who's on the naughty list. It's also an adoption story. Buddy's adoptive family has a greater power and impact than where Buddy was born. And how can we bring heaven to earth? Act like every day is Christmas. Remember, there's always room on the nice list. And sing loud for everyone to hear, even if you might not feel like it. So let's make smiling our favorite and discover God's truth in this movie.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story, the story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being.
Happy New Year and welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name's Paul McDonald, and in just a minute, we'll continue our conversation with Britt, JB, and Rob talking about Elf. And if you haven't listened to episode 1, I'd go ahead and go back and listen to that first, because we're basically just going to start right in the middle. But in our first episode, we talked about why people loved Christmas movies, how Buddy, as a static character, was able to change the world around him. And honestly, in this episode, we're going to dig a lot deeper into how Buddy transforms the world around him, because typically we look at these stories as an arc. There's a change or there's a revelation about the character that draws us in. But Buddy never changes in this movie, but the people around him do. And as Christians, as believers, as followers of Jesus, we're called to bring heaven to earth. We're called to impact the world around us. And we discuss how Buddy is able to, if we sort of equate the North Pole with heaven, how he's able to bring heaven to the world and to the people around him. So let's dive back in. Last week, we were talking about Buddy and how he looked at Santa. And JB, you sort of finished on this idea of the intimacy with the Father.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And why does Buddy come back to New York? Why does he leave the North Pole? I mean, you talk about a Christ model. The son, right? Because he was adopted. I mean, we're stretching a little bit. The son left the North Pole. He left heaven to redeem Walter.
Yeah.
Your dad is on the naughty list.
Right.
You need to redeem
and he
him.
Can't bear it.
Yeah.
And he can't bear it. He says,
Right.
no.
Yeah.
My dad.
Yeah,
he mourns it.
But then what does Santa say? It's not too late. I forget exactly the line, but he's like, it's not the end.
Right.
Yeah.
And like, what a beautiful sentiment. I mean, come on, Ed Asner, number one.
Right.
I mean, like the casting in this movie is unconsciously
fantastic.
It's so good.
Yeah.
But Santa, if you want to make him a godfather figure, says, look, but he's
I'll make you an offer you can't refuse. Wrong Godfather.
Give him a candy cane he can't refuse. But
He's got the head of a rocking horse in his bed.
But he gives him hope. He gives Buddy hope. Like, it's not a hopeless situation.
Yeah.
And he goes, if you'll share, what does he say? You got to share with them. You got to, he commissions him. You go share Christmas spirit. He goes, I'm good at that.
Yeah.
I know you are. Like, what a commissioning, what a sending moment. That again, I don't even know how conscious it is through the rest of the movie for Buddy, but what an amazing moment for his purpose. Again, he's static, but he's active. He's got purpose. And he's not stuck.
Yeah. And a lot of his actions move towards that reconciliation,
right?
With Walter. And so, he's showing Walter that he can make him a nice breakfast of spaghetti and Pop-Tarts or
maple syrup.
So just trying to woo him into this relationship with him,
right?
And he shows him the list of how great it can be with me. Let's eat cookie dough. Let's go ice skating. Let's snuggle.
That sounds fantastic.
And cuddle, right? At the end. And cuddle. Cuddle was
right.
the last one.
So I grabbed one clip, and this is the clip where Buddy asks Walter, his dad, to tuck him in.
Yeah, good.
But even throughout this whole film, I'm like, how often does Jesus approach me like Buddy? And I'm like Walter, too busy, and I'm keeping Jesus and his love and the experience of God and the intimacy. I'm keeping that at arm's distance because pick your reason. But here's that clip.
Yeah. Dad!
What?
I can't go to sleep unless I get tucked in.
What?
I can't go to sleep unless I get tucked in.
I am not going to tuck you in.
I promise I'll go right to sleep.
Fine.
Tickle fight! Tickle fight!
Stop!
Tickle fight! Go stop!
Sorry. You just lay there and go to sleep.
Okay.
Okay.
Dad? I love you.
Okay. Go to sleep.
Rob, was that a recording of the last time I visited and we got in a tickle fight? Is that what that is?
It may have been. It was epic. Well, we had the pillow fight first, and then the tickle fight. So
wait, did you pick up brushes and sing, some like 60s
absolutely
song?
I mean, love is a battlefield. Is I think what we sang.
So when were the York peppermint patty s'mores?
Those are so good. Yes. My son does have the Does It S'more, where we tried different s'more charcuterie boards.
And by the way, sardines do not s'more.
Yeah.
That's right. We were
All I
double
want
big
to know
spoons to go with what you were saying. Yeah.
Who was Big Spoon? Who was Little Spoon? That's all I need to know.
I'm always Big Spoon. I'm always Big Spoon. Yeah. So, but to bring it back, well, let's try to bring it back for a second.
I mean, we're going to have to.
Well, wait, why am I bringing it back on the rails? I never do that.
That's a good point.
But the intimacy that Jesus offers us, going back to what Paul was saying, he wants to be in that intimate relationship with us. And I'll even say, as an example from my life as a pastor, I remember one morning in worship, songs are playing and I'm worrying about a door that needs to be fixed. And then, I had to go do something and, the music's still playing, but I'm focused on, do we have enough coffee made? Do we have this ready? And, I sneak into the sanctuary while the last song is playing. But did I start singing? No, I didn't start singing. I started, counting to see how many people were there that day. And it really struck me later on in that week that, God turns his ear to us when we worship. So God listened that morning, like he was attentive to what was going on, and I offered him nothing, in worship. So it's kind of like Walter not wanting to have the tickle fight with Buddy in that scene. And he was offering me intimacy.
Yeah. And Walter lip syncing, right? You walked into worship to show that you were there, to show that you were present.
Yeah.
But you weren't really present. And and that's just like Walter lip syncing the Christmas carols at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
So good. So to go back to kind of the adoption thing, one of the things I wrote down was that this is a great adoption story. Like if most of us probably, and because despite what the popular media might want to think, like I know several Christians who have adopted and who are in the process of adopting. Like this is a very common story in my circle of Christian friends and churches, right?
My brother has 5 adopted kids.
Right. So it's even though it just kind of happens, like because we know the adoption stories well enough. Like, yes, it makes sense that he felt loved by his adopted father, Papa Elf, but adopted kids have this desire to go find their natural families, right? But here's, and so I actually think that's a cool sort of thing that they put in there, not really out front, but it's there. But here's what I wrote down is that his adopted family was more influential than his natural family. The adoptive culture actually transformed his natural culture. So in other words, like, and that's something that I think that the reason I'm bringing that up is that so often people come from more dysfunctional families than probably is healthy, right? I mean, no one's perfect and no one's family culture is perfect, but sometimes you come from very dysfunctional situations, and sometimes we can feel bound by that. We can feel like this is where I come from. But in Christ, you don't come from that anymore. That's not where you come from. And so instead of, he never felt bound by, Walter Hobbs. He never felt bound by his past. He never felt less than because of his past. He entered it from a completely free perspective. And we kind of see that like in the Father Stew movie, right? Just as an example, like when we did Father Stew a couple weeks ago.
Father Stew coming up later in January.
I was going to say, wait a minute.
It's like, I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, it's like, huh?
He has this very dysfunctional, toxic relationship with his natural father, his absent natural father. And then once he kind of comes into faith, you see how he reacts to his father and his parents differently. And he says the thing, and we talked about it on the podcast, where he says the line, "I have a different father now." But that didn't mean he didn't try to love his natural father anymore. And my point is that maybe people will change, maybe they won't, but we don't have to be bound by the source of the broken world, but that doesn't mean we just cut them off either. We can love them. We can come from a different perspective like he does. And I just love that the adopted culture transformed the natural culture. And his father, Walter Hobbs, sings loud for all to hear, right? Yeah. And that's not who Walter Hobbs was. Even though if this is why this is such a perfect movie, if you didn't notice, he had a guitar in his old old picture. In other words, at one point he wasn't the cold-hearted prophet dude, right? That wasn't who he was.
And at the end, he's playing piano with Jovi.
Right.
And part of what you're talking about is identity. Where do we find our identity? Do we find it in Jesus, or do we find it in our brokenness? Do we find our identity in our depression, our anxiety, our anger, our fears? What are we going to identify with and allow that to transform us? It's that, don't conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So identifying in Christ, that's kind of what Buddy, is doing. His identity is with Santa. Our identity is with Jesus.
So, also kind of in preparation for this, I watched the movies that made us on Netflix, where it talked about Elf and how, they continually wanted to change what this movie was.
Right.
Because
I love the story behind it.
Yeah. Cause Old School came out like right before us, which made, Will Ferrell super famous as Frank the Tank, not Buddy the Elf. And they definitely wanted to kind of strip that innocence away from it, which would have ruined the movie. Right. And then they also, so at the end, when Walter sings and the sleigh goes over, that was the end, right? You didn't have that retrospective of seeing all these people that he interacted with, all these people that he brought joy to, all of these people that he shared, the spirit of Christmas with, the truth in this movie with. But I think it's incredibly powerful, right? That all of these people were kind of experiencing the spirit of Christmas.
Right.
But the person who was the furthest away, the way the story laid out, he was very much like a Hallmark character, unfortunately. The furthest away and the most self-absorbed and the furthest away from the Christmas spirit. Once he came to it, that was that just magnificent moment of the sleigh flying and hitting full speed above him. And it's a lot like, we've talked about the prodigal son, the prodigal son returning and just this amazing feast for the one that strayed away and that ultimately came back. And just the joy and the Thanksgiving and the feast that happened with that. And I thought it was really powerful. It was really interesting to watch this movie again, looking for these themes.
As time goes on, there's more stuff that comes out about this movie. Like Jon Favreau was not Jon Favreau at the time.
No,
this was like his first movie.
Yeah.
And this was Will Ferrell's career, because as much as he was popular in Old School, he was not the main character. He was not like a lead character. And so
he had that and Night at the Roxbury, which was not great box office wise.
Even further down the spiral, Ladies Man, where he was a Greco-Roman wrestler.
Well, he was in he was in bit parts because he was a Saturday Night Live guy who was popular with Saturday Night Live, but I saw an interview recently with Will Ferrell where he hated this movie. Like he talked about he was in his trailer in the elf costume thinking, well, I guess I'll go back to Saturday Night Live. Like he thought my career is over. My career is over. But Favreau fought tooth and nail the whole time because his vision, and this is what's impressive to me as a writer, his vision was to make this a classic. That was his vision.
Timeless.
He wanted to make this a timeless classic. Yep. And there is no movie studio who wants to make a timeless classic. They all want to make a blockbuster in the theater movie, right? So whatever that means, that's what they're going to go with. But he fought for costuming. He fought for the script. He fought like Will Ferrell. I think there are two movies, and they're my two favorite Will Ferrell movies, although I like a lot of them. But there's two movies of his that he actually sticks to the script. It's this one and Stranger Than Fiction, because Favreau really, but he hadn't done Iron Man. He hadn't done The Mandalorian. He hadn't done any of this stuff yet.
Yeah, he hadn't done any of this.
But I give so much credit to Favreau because he kept the heart in it. He kept the innocence, like you were saying. Yeah. Because Jim Carrey was an and I'm so glad it wasn't Jim Carrey. He kept the core of it, what he wanted it to be. And it did become, I remember when it came out and I saw it and I was like, this is an instant classic. This is now up there with It's a Wonderful Life and all the other movies. And it just came out like this movie, automatically. It was so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So bringing you guys back to the rails.
No.
Because I want to go back to that idea of how did Buddy transform the people around him? And so I want to play the clip from the mailroom, which is where we get our mailroom coffee from.
Delicious. Yeah.
Because as we talk about, Buddy loved telling stories, but he also loved hearing stories. And so just look at that of how Buddy engages with the guy. Like, remember, he tried to put on his dad's clothes. He tried to be his dad.
Yep.
He's like, suit didn't work. Thank you. I don't have to drink coffee. He goes to the mailroom and engages with the people around him and ends up connecting with this complete stranger in a way that he didn't with Walter.
Then I traveled through the 7 levels of the candy cane forest and past a sea of swirly, twirly gumdrops. Ooh! It's sucky. Oh, wonderful. Yes! That is marvelous how Oh, it's very sucky! It's very sucky! Whew. So how'd you get here?
Work release.
Syrup and coffee? Why didn't I think of that? Can I try some?
Be my guest.
Very generous of you. I love syrup. Oh, I love it. You know I sound like a broken record, but we are buddies. You're my best friend. That's it. You're my best friend.
You know, buddy,
You're my best
nobody
friend.
around here listens to me. I got really good ideas.
I believe it. I know. I'm right. I listen to you. You have great ideas.
I just try to go to the flow, you know?
Good. Go with the flow.
Yeah.
Go with the flow.
No, I got to get out of the flow.
Well, then get out.
I'm in the flow. That's what got me here. I'm 26 years old. I got nothing to show for.
You're young. You're so young. My papa, he didn't make Master Tinker until he was 490.
Tickle fight! Tickle fight!
So, JB, this is your scene. So why don't you kick us off here with the syrup and the coffee?
Oh, me? You know what strikes me about every time Buddy starts to talk to people around him and he shares his story never changes. He always sticks to the truth. When he could try to conform it to what's going on around him, but no, he is always a messenger of truth. But in that, he's also listening to the person's story so that he can connect with them and tell, so that his story is valid to this guy because he's showing that guy that his story is valid to him. And so I think as Christians,
what does he say? Nobody listens to me.
Yeah.
And Buddy is.
And that's the thing. I think some of the issues that we have in the world today is because the Christian community has tried to push people away and keep them at arm's length and not listen to them and hear them out and then show them the truth. I think people desire to be in community. People desire to be heard, but they also at some level desire to hear the truth. And so we listen to people, we love them, but we also don't compromise on the truth.
And we earn the right to speak that truth into their life by caring for them where they are, for loving them where they are, for not wanting them to stay there. Right. And I think that's why we enjoy having conversations over whiskey because people's, people's guards are down. So they share their life, they share their struggle. They connect with you. You're purposefully, like we've talked about, Paul was sitting down having cigars, right? Yeah. You've got an hour that you're going to be sitting down talking to this person. Your guard's down. It's a more intimate setting. You're real with them. And like Buddy, right? We need to always share the joy that is within us and share the place that we came from, which is the kingdom of God, and understand where that is and understand how this person that we're talking to, while they, may not necessarily want it now or may not seem to fit into that now, they will desire to have that, and us being different and us showing them the love and investing in them and earning that right to speak truth into their lives.
Yeah. I mean,
well, and also I think go ahead.
No, I
just said, go
ahead.
No, just kidding. Go ahead, buddy.
4-person podcasts are just crazy.
Britt, you're on.
No, when we started the coffee company, one of the things that we talked about was we wanted to start a company around something that was going to create community. And coffee, we talked about coffee, we talked about beer, we talked about cigars. We like, because these are things where when you say, let's have a drink, let's have a beer, let's have a cup of coffee, let's have dinner. You are literally asking someone to have a relationship with you. And that's part of what it is. And stories create intimacy. Stories are what create intimacy. And so when we share our story, and you can't argue with a story. No one ever argued with Paul in Acts when he told his story when he was knocked off of a horse and he was blinded. No one argued his theology. No one. This is what happened to me, and it ends up. Who was it? Felix, who was like, "Man, you're almost convincing me to become a Christian." Like, but he's like, "Look, I'm just going to share my story," and he just keeps sharing it, just like Buddy keeps sharing his story. But also when you ask other people for their stories, man, you can really find out, and you can start asking questions, and you can start encouraging people, and then you can start calling stuff out like, man, you're really good at that. Man, that's so awesome that you would do that for your kids or whatever it might be. You can start calling stuff out and see that stuff come alive in them. And and that's a huge part of what he does in the movie, with all of them.
Yeah, and going back to the mailroom, what a perfect picture of the people that Jesus came to reach out to, right?
Absolutely.
You know, Buddy was sent there as a punishment almost. So you have the idea that the mailroom is where the rejects go, and you go down and you see this dingy mailroom and these outcast-looking people, and the guy on work release.
Britt prefers the term misfits.
Yeah,
it is the island of misfit toys, just from Rudolph.
But those are
inspiration. So yeah, definitely.
Those are the people that Jesus came to minister to, right? And those are the people that the religious leaders of the time said, "Well, why are you having dinner with sinners? Why are you having dinner with tax collectors?"
Yep.
But that's the perfect term, because Buddy goes down into the mailroom, and not only does he go down to the mailroom, the mailroom doesn't change him. Actually gives them an opportunity to tell people the truth.
Yeah.
And he turns the mailroom into a party.
Yeah.
Party.
Yes.
And he gets in trouble for it. He turns the mailroom into a party. And I'm telling you, that's what Jesus did. Jesus would go, that's so good. He would go into these areas and he would turn these areas into a party. But see, here's what we want to be like, oh, well, that's a bad part of the neighborhood. That's a bad neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's this is where the crackheads go, or that
dude doesn't smell so good.
That dude doesn't smell
it's
so
very
good.
Sucky.
But God goes into those, or we think that about people, right? We think about people. He's a tax collector. She's a prostitute. Blah, 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 blah. They're this, they're that. They're a Democrat. They're a Republican. Whatever. Like we look at people and we and areas and neighborhoods and people groups or whatever they might be, and we put them in these little boxes. And God wants to go in there and start a party, but it's not a party. It's not like, isn't it great to be a Republican? It's like it's just, or whatever it is, whatever the group identity is. It's now they're he's dancing and they're clapping and he changes the atmosphere and it just like with the guy, whoever the manager at Gimbel's who thought someone was out for his job. He couldn't just enjoy it. He goes, "This is too good. Someone's out
too good.
Someone's out for my job." And that's how how the religious leaders felt about Jesus, right? They're like, "Oh, he's out for our jobs. He's not, he's got a job. He's already king. He doesn't need your job." But they don't, but people feel threatened and all of that because we like our systems. But man, God's got a different system. The culture is a totally different system, and it's going to disrupt the systems of this world one way or the other, but it's going to do it with joy and love and relationship and all of that stuff.
Well, and like you said, when you talk about like a Republican Party or a Democrat, like we have to realize we're not a part of a democracy as Christians. We're part of a kingdom, and we get to be a part of a kingdom party, which is greater than anything we'll ever see here on earth.
That's right.
I'll get off my soapbox.
Yeah.
Well, and
that was a very small divided
by and it isn't divided by things that we create, right? It's a unified kingdom worshiping him that has all power and all glory and all majesty that we simply can't comprehend. But our joy to the world should be showing that to them, so they ask what's different.
Yeah. Joy to the world. That sounds really amazing. Somebody should write a song.
What a great title.
I think Jeremiah was a bullfrog. Yeah.
I found when I am in that kingdom culture mindset, I sing spontaneously. Because if you so here's the picture we get of heaven in Revelation. There's constant worship and singing happening. It's constant and it's loud and there's movement. In other words, the stuff going on around the throne isn't obligation and no fun, right? It's It's awesome. Right. It's a party. It's worship. It's noise. It's activity. And it's what happens in the mailroom. Like, this is what we get around the throne.
Yeah.
And
poop, there it is. Poop, there it is.
You know, who let the elves out?
Sprinkles.
But the fact that he was willing, of course, the whole end of the movie is about singing. But the fact that he comes in, she's singing half a duet. Like, what a longing for relationship that is. She's singing half a duet. Yeah. How many times do we feel like we're singing half a duet if someone would just join us, right? If someone would just come alongside of us, and and the sound of singing draws him in. Oh, that's my elf culture. Oh, that's my culture. And it draws him in. And I'm telling you, man, like, the fact that, but he has to, I sing, but I just don't.
We are not encouraging men to go into the girls' locker room. I just want to say that.
All right. There's the disclaimer.
There we go.
Not to mention that the song they're singing is a little sort of been past.
Right? It's a little, I can understand why Jovi was a little nervous.
But anyway, but the fact is that he was so readily willing to break out in song about anything and make up a song. I'm singing, and he would just make it up. And that's
I'm here with my dad.
I'm here with my dad.
And I'm singing. But that's very childlike. There's this one time my wife and I went to, and if you've ever had kids, you know what I'm talking about. But even before we had kids, my wife and I went to an orphanage where these kids were not necessarily happy. And we were in Korea, and we were playing with the kids, and I started pushing this little girl. I don't know, she was 5 maybe. This little Korean girl. We didn't speak the same language or whatever, but I'm pushing her on the swing, and she starts singing a song just spontaneously. And I'm like, this is part of what it's like to have a childlike heart. And when I'm in that place with the Lord in his presence, that's what I start doing. I start singing songs. I start humming a tune. I start, and it's a different feeling about my life. And that's another thing that he does, is he gives people permission, almost like it's okay to just sing, guys. Just don't mouth the words, like you were pointing out, Rob. Like,
right?
Just
come on, Walter.
Sing and there are my mentor used to say this before we would get into worship: there will never be another day like today. There will never be another opportunity like this opportunity, where this group of people is together just like this. This will never happen again. So let's take full advantage of the opportunity to, as a group, in unity, sing unto God that we love, right? And you're like, yeah, of course, right? Instead of like, well, I guess we got to sing now. Work is your favorite thing now. Let's see this opportunity.
This is the 29th time we've sung this bridge. Can we move on to another song?
No. I can sing of the Lord forever. They would do that.
Literally, I could say.
But
you were trying to test that, aren't you?
But that's. I have 5 things on my list of what he did to transform the world around him. We've talked about all of them except for that one. That his singing spontaneously, and I think it's very biblical. Right? It says twice, sing unto one another with hymns, psalms, and spiritual songs. Give voice to the spirit inside of you that cries out, Abba, Father. In other words, the spirit of the Son within me is already singing. I don't have to even manufacture it. I don't even have to force it to happen. I just have to, even if I don't feel like it, I have to say, the Son is already telling his Father, I love you, and wants to sing about it. All I have to do is let it happen. All I have to do is rest in him and rest in that reality and let it happen. And then I'm there. And then I do feel like it, right? Then Santa does appear, right? Like you were saying at the end, right? Then I do feel like it. Teaching one another, it says in hymn, psalm. We actually teach each other just like they were doing, right? We teach each other with this stuff. And I love that.
we've talked about sort of how we did it, but understanding our identity is the reality of how he does it. And there's the scene where, Walter rejects him. He's out on the bridge, very much like the bridge on It's a Wonderful Life. Interestingly as well, Clarence jumps into the river because he knows George would jump in to save him. Well, here comes Santa's sleigh coming in and crashing, because what can Buddy Elf do other than go rescue Santa?
Yeah.
And so why does Buddy do this? Why was Buddy chosen? Why is Buddy such an impact? It comes back to this moment where, if you look at this bigger picture of the movie, going back to he was Papa Elf's tinker, right? And what did they work on? The motor of the sleigh, the trappings. But what does he do is he shares his experience. He doesn't feel like an elf because he's not. He's a human. He's giant, doesn't fit in the things. He makes 85 Etch-a-Sketches where everybody else is making 1,000.
Terrible. Yeah.
He's
unacceptable.
What was it? The ninny-headed, what was that
Cotton-headed
term?
ninny muggins.
Cotton-headed ninny muggins.
And they went,
and so that's what he says about himself. But the truth is, when he sees Santa, remember Santa, I know him. When he sees Santa in Central Park, he says something that really reflects a lot of what Jesus says, but also what Paul says in his letters. So here's that clip.
Buddy, is that you? Are you okay? Boy, am I glad to see you. The clausometer suddenly just dropped down to 0. There's just no Christmas spirit anymore. The strain was too much. The engine broke free of her mounts. I need an elf's help.
I'm not an elf, Santa. I can't do anything right.
Buddy, you're more of an elf than anyone I ever met. And the only one who I would want working on my sleigh tonight.
Really?
Really? Will you fix it for me, buddy?
I'll try. Papa taught me how.
You're more of an elf than anyone I've ever met. And that's what Paul talks about when he's in I can't remember which letter. I think it's the Galatians. Because people had come into the church and they were saying to the Gentile believers, yeah, you believe in this Jesus guy, but if you really want to be saved, you have to be circumcised. If you really want to be saved, you have to fall under the law. And what Paul says is the external doesn't matter. There is no circumcision. There is no uncircumcision. What matters is Christ. Is Christ, you're everything. And that's what that's what Santa says to Buddy. You're more of an elf than anyone I've ever met, not because of your DNA or your genetic code, but because that's who you are, who your heart is, or what your heart is.
Well, and part of, I think it's Paul, right? Doesn't he say he is a true Israelite who was one inwardly, and circumcision is inward? Think about Paul saying that. This is a guy who killed Christians, who was a Pharisee of the Pharisees, who was like in every way the perfect Jew. And yet now he's saying what really matters is not your bloodline, but the heart. And that's what we see with that's what Buddy has been showing us the whole movie, is that he is a true elf in every sense of the word. And it's coming out of him. And even though he was adopted into it, he's just as much an elf, if not more, than those elves, who were, back up at the North Pole.
It's like what Paul said, there's neither slave nor free, Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female.
Yeah.
Our identity is in Christ. It's not those, it's not even heritage. It's not even gender. It's not even anything else. Good. It's all in Christ. Our identity is in Jesus. We don't have, like going back to what I said about, Democratic and, Democrats and Republicans, that's not our identity. No. Those things are not our identity. My gender is not my identity. My identity is Jesus.
Is in Christ. Yep. Yeah.
and that's Buddy. He's all in.
Yeah. One of the things I love about this movie is kind of probably one of my last thoughts as I've been talking about the different cultures, the kingdom culture, where he came from, heaven, the magical realm, whatever you want to call that here's what happens at the end of the movie is that he reconciles those two worlds together. The fact that he would stubbornly and indomitably, right, held on to the North Pole elf culture, or what it actually did was it reconciled those two cultures together. Because you see, like you talked about, I think JB, right? Like you see the little snippet of them having them together, and they are having like a family moment with he's at the piano and they're having this cool, like, it's community, right? That's Paul and I talk about this all the time. How many times at the end of movie is community and family sort of picture the reward of coming to truth at the end of a movie? And but then he didn't leave it there. Now they're in the North Pole, and they got a baby, and now they're with the adopted father, and they're dressed like elves, and like he's bringing his family up into this reality, right? Like and I love that because he kept a hold of that which was supernatural, transcendent, magical, that he was able to actually reconcile the broken with the magical. And that's what we're called to do. We're called to be that bridge. We're called to be that bridge, and as ambassadors, right? Be reconciled unto God, like plead with people, beg them, like, come on, come with me back to this other world. It's so awesome and amazing. And that's kind of where the movie wraps up. And I got that sense this time when I was watching it. I was like, that's so beautiful that it wasn't just that he transformed the people in that world, like he actually brought those worlds together and closer.
Yeah. And a lot of times I tell my congregation, we're ambassadors of grace, and we should bridge, the spiritual with the secular. And that's kind of what Buddy did. Yeah. It's great.
Well, John Eldridge has used the term amphibians to describe how we live, because we're both spiritual. We can live both, like amphibians, they can live underwater and on land. And what Buddy, you talk about community, and this is a guy who doesn't belong anywhere.
Right.
He's a human in elf land. He's like, I don't fit in here.
Would you say he's
and
a
then
misfit,
he goes
Paul?
down.
Would you say he's a misfit?
No, but you would.
He brings the choir down 2 octaves. So he's very critical.
But that's the other piece, right? Because he shows up and he's an elf in a human world, and he doesn't really fit in there. He doesn't fit in either world. And yet he's got to sort of have a foot in both in order to have an impact. And if he had neglected either one, for the purpose of the movie, Christmas dies. There's no Christmas.
Good.
Right?
Good.
Because if he had stayed in the North Pole, he wouldn't have been in New York to help Santa. If he had embraced his human side, he wouldn't have been able to help Santa. That's our challenge, because we feel like, I don't know about we, again, the royal we, fancy That's Rob. Right. He's Rob's actually, he's descended from some foreign country. He's some royal prince from somewhere.
I am a lord.
You are a royal something.
I did. Wow. I did purchase one.
You guys can fill in the blanks.
That's right. I did purchase 1 square foot of land in Scotland to make me a lord.
There you go. Well, and see, that fits in with our Christmas movie. Oh, unbeknownst to you, you're a prince. You're a lord of all that you survey.
That's a Hallmark movie waiting to happen right there.
That's right.
I fall in love, even though you're just a Christmas tree salesman. No, I'm actually a Scottish lord.
A Scottish lord.
But that's our challenge, is to feel like, even though we feel like we don't belong, but realize one, that we do, because God has put us here. You know, the line from Ephesians, that we are God's handiwork, his masterpiece, put in place to do the works that he planned for us.
Yeah.
And then to go do them.
Yeah, and think about it. Buddy had this story to tell, and he told it to everybody along the way. And what happens at the end? His story is published, and now he can continue to share it with everybody.
And his story ripples across all the people that he's met, right?
Yeah.
And just like Buddy, right? There's our story, even no matter how tame or ordinary we may think it is, right? Different parts of our life may resonate with someone and draw them to a relationship with us and give us the ability and the authority to speak Christ into their lives and to speak that love and truth into their life. No matter what we think of our experiences, it connects with somebody, and elves love to tell stories, and we should love to tell the story of what Christ has done for us and how he's changed us.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back to the very beginning of the movie for our closing clip. And it's from the Code of Elves, because Buddy's there in elf school, and they talk about the Code of Elves, because the idea is, well, how can we be elves in our culture? How can we be the aroma of life? So they talk about the Code of Elves, and we've talked both parts of this podcast about what does it look like? What is elf culture? What is kingdom culture? And I think it's summed up in these three things.
Now, before we learn how to build the latest in extreme graphic chipset processors, let's recite the Code of the Elves, shall we? Number 1.
Treat every day like Christmas.
Number 2.
There's room for everyone on the nice list.
Number 3.
The best way to spread Christmas cheer is singing loud for all to hear.
I love it.
Well said.
Yeah.
Act like every day is Christmas.
Like Jesus is born again.
Every day.
Joy to the world. As you mentioned, Rob, that sounds like it should be a song somewhere.
It should be. I think someone needs to write that down. I just don't, I'm not going to take credit for it. You can have it. Someone needs to write it down.
Well, when you think about the Code of the Elves, it's like that's what marks them in their identity, right? That's how you can tell they're an elf. And Jesus tells us they'll know you're my followers by what? By our, hitting people
doctrine.
With theology? No.
By our doctrine, by labels.
by our denomination.
By our epic worship band, by the pastor's skinny jeans. No, he says they'll know you are Christians
by the pastor's beard.
By your love. Right. And that's the mark of a Christian, is everything that we do is out of an overflow of our love relationship with the Father. The Father lavishes us with love, and we overflow with that love, and that's how people can see we're Christians.
Well, the second one was there's room for everyone on the nice list. Sorry, there's room for everyone on the nice list, and it's something I said recently. I said, we don't build the kingdom. We don't expand the kingdom. That's not what we do. The kingdom exists. It already is, and it is and it is eternal, and it is infinite. Because if I could expand it, I could diminish it, and I can't. So, but here's what we can do. We can invite people into it, and we can enter it. And what we can do is we can populate it with people. That's what we can do. And here's the thing about something infinite, right? There's room for everybody. There's always room for more on the nice list, or whatever the thing is. Here's the thing about the kingdom. It's infinite. If I divide infinite by 2, how much do I have? Infinite. If I divide,
there'd be no math today.
If I divide infinity by 1,000, how much does each person have? Infinity. If I divide infinity by 1 billion, see where I'm going with this? It doesn't matter how many people are in, we all get full. We all get a full restoration. We all get a full inheritance. It's such good news. This is why it's exciting. This is why it should excite us. And it's not just work is your new favorite thing. This is awesome to share with people.
This is why smiling should be my favorite.
Yeah.
That's right. This is why we line up 1,000 light brights to proclaim the name of Christ.
Well, first of all, Paul, you didn't tell I was going to get a mathematics lesson today. But second of all, when he says there's always room on the nice list, that can be summed up in one word, and that's grace.
Mm-hmm.
There's always room for someone on the nice list, and that's because of the grace of Jesus Christ.
Again, going back to what Santa says about his dad, who's on the naughty list, he's like, but that's not the end.
It's not too late.
It's not over. Just because he's on it now, people change. And there's such hope in that, and grace, and with that faith, he doesn't give up on his dad, even though his dad just throws him up against the wall, like right after.
What do you want? Money? You want money?
But like, it doesn't even faze him. It doesn't even faze Buddy that his dad is like mean and throws him up against the wall and calls him names, and he's like, well, I was thinking we could eat a thing of cookie dough and
then cuddle
and maybe hold hands. And he's trying to hold hands with him as they leave the jail. Oh my gosh, it's just it's one of those perfect movies where it's like that they put so much intention into every shot and every line, and they made it work. Just like we were talking about When Harry Met Sally, and like you just, even the stuff that was maybe a little whatever off the cuff. There probably might have been a couple moments they let Will Ferrell do a little bit. Maybe beef and cheese was his line. I don't know. Yeah. But even that stuff was, man, this is what is going to work and flow. And it's just so good.
Yeah.
Mm. And how does Buddy do it? Right. Buddy comes down. Does he hold it against his dad? Does he hold it against Walter for not knowing he existed, for not abandoning him?
No.
All he wants to do is love his dad.
That's right.
Even when his dad treats him like garbage, he still loves him. And that's called forgiveness.
Yeah.
All throughout that. And that's the power of forgiveness. We don't have that power in us. Like in ourselves, in our fallen state, in our sinful state, we don't have that power. That, Britt, you had mentioned the Sermon on the Mount. That's full of things that I can't do.
Right.
Apart from Jesus.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's how he shows that, is by forgiving Walter every step of the way until Walter finally caves in, basically, to the power of love. Not to go back to the future on us.
Power of love. Well, what he says to your point, Paul, what he says to his dad is, what do you want? Money? He goes, I just wanted to meet you, and I thought you'd want to meet me.
Yeah.
Like it's all relationship. Yep. It's all and I'm telling you guys, I said this the other day to people. I said, do you realize how happy it makes God that you're with him? That's his actual goal. His actual goal is that you're with him. That's the whole point. Look at the end of Revelation. What's the whole point? I'm the God and you're my children. Eden. Like we're together. We're one with each other forever. Like his goal is relationship. And that's it's so innocent, but so pure that's his motivation. Yeah. I just thought you'd want to meet me. I want to meet you. I just thought we could be together.
And then what's the last one?
The fastest way to spread Christmas cheer is to sing out loud for all to hear.
Loud for all to hear.
And that goes back to me, is that worship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how often do I not feel like we're like, JB, I love that you admitted that you were sort of hesitant, dreading, not wanting to show up tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's times I don't feel like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Rob and I had the conversation on my way home. I was like, no, I'm serious. It was a bad day.
Yeah.
But I was like, I've committed to this. And now that I'm here, it's been amazing. It's been uplifting to my spirit. And if we would let ourselves
believe
What
that I called you and said, "Hey, you haven't responded, so I'm guessing you had a terrible."
That's awesome.
And it was. But if we open ourselves, I could have closed myself off and said, "Nope, not going to do it tonight. I'm tired. I'm spent. I don't want anything to do with it." But what did I do? I got on, fellowshipped with some good brothers in Christ, some new friends.
Yeah.
I've known Paul, but it's my first time meeting Britt, though I've heard you on the podcast.
Thank you.
Now my spirit's uplifted. I feel good. I'm glad I was here. And I think if we take that approach to worshiping God, that even when we don't feel like it, if we just even begrudgingly go into his presence and open ourselves a little bit, he's going to start, lavishing his love on us, and we're going to feel his grace. And, is that going to, my problems aren't fixed, I still have to, when I'm done here, I still have all the problems that happened today. Right. But now it's different, and if we did that with worship, and just opened ourselves to God, what we realize is the problems we're facing, as Paul said, the suffering we endure here is far surpassed by the glory that we're going to receive one day. What we see is when we're in the presence of such a big and loving God, our problems seem a lot smaller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least with that view in mind, right? I mean, the problems are still there, but in the context of an all-powerful, all-loving God, it's way more hopeful. So I'm going to share just Paul, you can cut this later if you want, but I'm going to share this quick little thing.
Don't cut it.
This is absolutely. Normally, when Britt says it, it's a stone cold lock. It's making it to the podcast.
Right. So you guys are all. Everybody here is married, right? And there are those moments where you're getting in bed and you kind of give your wife a little look. Like, is it going to be the night?
What's up?
This might get cut. Hang on. Where are we going with this, Britt?
Is it too late? Is it, how you're reading the room, right?
You're looking for favor from your wife.
And sometimes my wife says this. She looks at me and she goes, "I could be convinced."
And I can be convincing.
And that's what I thought of when you thought, sometimes I don't feel like it, but sometimes when I go to God, I was like, I know I love you, and I know I can be convinced. I may not be there right now. I know I'm not there right now, but I do love you. And I know that if it starts, it's not obligation.
Yeah.
It's just being honest.
Yeah.
God, David was honest. And how many Psalms was David honest? I don't really feel like worshiping you right now, God. I got people chasing me. My best friends, betraying me.
Our pets' heads are falling off.
Right. Dogs and cats are living together. It's mass hysteria.
Mass hysteria.
You might have set a record for total movies referenced in one.
But God, I know, because I had the experience, that if I'll just start, I know the love's there. I know the Spirit is there. I know it's not obligation. It's just the knowing of a relationship that I can be convinced.
Yeah.
I know it's there, and I may not feel like it right now, but because feelings are temporary. But come on, God, I know you love me. Just love me. Just woo me.
Yeah.
Woo me, God. Come on. And he loves to do it. It's his joy. That's what the Bible says. It's his pleasure to bring us into relationship with himself. It makes him happy. And I just wish more people knew that. I wish we could convince more people of that in our world, that this is how God feels about me. I mean, but it starts with me. I have to believe it, right? How am I going to convince people?
We have to be buddy.
Yeah, I have to.
Because we're Walter in the movie, right? We're Walter. Yeah. I don't want to tickle fight. I don't want to hold hands. I sure as hell am not going to sing.
Right.
Right. But when we do, I think I'm going to talk about on the YouTube channel that idea of how do we turn our faith into sight? How do we take what we believe into what we see? And it is, I mean, it's funny you said that, Britt, because I was sitting here on my couch in my office. I'm like, oh, I've got all this stuff to do. And I wasn't feeling it. I was like, And so like, I was like, yeah, I could, but I felt like God was saying, just listen to this, listen to this meditation, listen to this song, listen to this, bring me your heart. Mm-hmm. I love what you said, Britt. I can be convinced. And that because we think, oh God, I should smiling should be my favorite, but I really don't feel like smiling. Yeah. And so we go and we say, I want smiling to be my favorite, but I don't feel like smiling. I don't feel like singing. I don't feel like praying. I don't feel like reading my Bible. And it's taking that saying, hey, the grace that brought me here is the grace that takes me there.
Yeah.
Help me. So good. Not just help me pray, help me want to pray. Yeah. And I think those are like those days that you work out when you don't want to work out are the best workouts that you can have. Yeah. Those days that you turn to God, it's like, God, I don't want to do this. I know I'm not feeling it. I've got all this crap going on. Catch my heart. Convince me.
Yeah. Look, this has helped me so much in my walk. The prayer is the prayer that God wants me to pray is already happening. I just have to join in. The worship is already happening. I just have to join in. The revelation is already happening. I just have to join in. The speaking, God's speaking is already, all of this is already, the partying is already happening. It's already I can't manufacture it. I don't have to. He's not expecting me to manufacture it. He's just expecting me to say, here it is. Just come join it. Just come. You couldn't do it on your own anyway. Just come join the party. Come join it. Yeah. And he totally gets it. He doesn't feel bad. It's not like he feels bad and pouts when I say I don't really feel like it. Like he knew that already. But if we're honest and we can say, hey, God, just woo me. And he is so faithful. Yeah. He's been faithful to me.
So, guys, thank you for JB and Rob and Britt. Thank you guys for talking about Elf. Great, guys. And I hope you had an awesome Christmas. And
what, Elf?
Here we go.
So now that we're about to hit the New Year's, if you still haven't found that perfect gift, it's either Ong Bak or the Alf.
Ong Bak.
Alf shirt on Amazon. Yeah. Just go all in, man.
And so, JB and Rob, where can people find what you guys are doing? Because you're on YouTube and podcasts, right?
We are. So you can find us jbbibleandbourbon.com/social. So that's going to have all of our social media links. JB's ridiculous TikTok.
Ridiculous.
It's also going to have our Instagram, our Facebook, all of our podcatchers, as well as YouTube and Rumble. So we're everywhere you want to be, and a lot of places you don't. Yep. So jbbibleandbourbon.com/social.
And I'll have all those links in the show notes as well as on the website. And you guys have a Patreon as well, right?
We do. So jbbibleandbourbon.com will also have our Patreon link. We can have our apostle and disciple tier. So that gives you an opportunity to have time with us. Again, we want to build a community to empower you to be able to have community in your neighborhood, in your local neighborhood, and have conversations about Christ over some whiskey conversations. jbbibleandbourbon.com/social.
So thank you guys for joining us. We hope that you had a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we'll see you in 2023.
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, who am I to be?